The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep rumble that echoed through the crystalline halls of Nexus Prime. Emergency lights bathed everything in a harsh red glow as delegates from 47 different worlds hurried to their assigned seats. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension and fear. Admiral Kim Jamin adjusted his simple black uniform as he followed the human delegation through the towering archway. At barely 2 meters tall, he felt like an ant walking among giants. The Arcturnian representatives loomed over everyone at nearly 4 meters each, their thick gray skin scarred from centuries of warfare. The ethereal Quellians floated in their environmental suits, their translucent bodies pulsing with nervous energy. Even the normally calm Vorthans seemed agitated, their feathered crests standing on end. The humans took their seats in the back corner, the same modest table they had occupied for 3 years since first contact. Captain Lee Sora sat to Jane's right, her fingers drumming silently against her tablet as she reviewed the emergency briefing data. On his left, Dr. Park Minho studied the holographic displays with the intense focus that had made him Earth's leading xenotechnology expert. "This session will come to order," announced High Arbiter Velkos, his 4 eyes reflecting the red emergency lighting. The ancient being had presided over the council for over 2 centuries, but today, his usually steady voice carried a tremor of genuine fear. "We face a crisis unlike any in recorded galactic history." The central chamber darkened as massive holographic displays activated above their heads. Star charts showed the outer rim territories, but something was wrong. 11 star systems that should have been glowing with the light of inhabited worlds now showed as empty, black spaces. 72 hours ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected gravitational anomalies in Sector 7 Alpha, Velkos continued. "What we found defies all previous understanding of warfare and destruction." The hologram shifted to show sensor readings that made several delegates gasp in horror. Entire planets had been stripped down to their rocky core, not destroyed by weapons or natural disasters, but methodically dismantled layer by layer. Atmospheric processors had been built and operated on impossible timescales. Biomass readings showed that every living thing on 11 worlds had simply vanished. Commander Thaxwell, of the Thoraxian hegemony, rose from his seat, his massive bulk casting shadows across the chamber. "Honored Council, our archives contain references to this pattern. Ancient records speak of the Devourers, a machine intelligence that emerges from the void between galaxies every 50,000 years. A collective shudder ran through the assembly. Even species that had never heard the name seemed to instinctively fear it. According to our historical data," Thaxwell continued, his translator struggling with the guttural Thoraxian language, "the Devourers consume entire worlds to fuel their expansion. They harvest all biological matter and strip mine planetary cores for raw materials. No civilization has ever survived direct contact with their forces." Dr. Yoon Haejin of the Ethereal Collective activated her own display, showing mathematical projections that painted a terrifying picture based on current expansion rates and historical patterns. "The Devourer fleet will reach the core worlds within 6 standard months. Our combined military assets are insufficient to mount any meaningful resistance." The chamber erupted in panicked voices as delegates argued in dozens of different languages. Some called for immediate evacuation of all inhabited systems. Others demanded impossible military solutions. The Vorthan delegation began calculating refugee logistics for trillions of beings. J-Min listened quietly as species with technologies far beyond Earth's capabilities spoke of inevitable defeat. The Quellians could manipulate matter at the quantum level. The Arcturnians commanded fleets that could shatter moons with focused energy weapons. The Vorthans had defensive shields powered by captured stars themselves, yet every one of them spoke only of retreat and evacuation. "Our quantum artillery proved useless against their adaptive hull plating," reported Admiral Zektar of the Combined Defense Force. Their ships absorbed our most powerful weapons and converted the energy to fuel their own systems. We lost an entire battle group in the first engagement. Captain Lee Sora leaned toward Jamin and whispered, "They're thinking about this all wrong. They're trying to fight an extermination with conventional military tactics." Dr. Park Min-ho nodded agreement, his eyes never leaving the tactical displays. "Look at their approach patterns. The Devourers expect organized resistance from established military forces. They've adapted to counter every standard galactic warfare doctrine." The debate raged for hours, as the Council struggled with plans for the largest evacuation in galactic history. Shipping routes were calculated to move entire populations. Resource allocation was debated for maintaining civilization during a exodus to the far rim territories. Some delegates even suggested abandoning the galaxy entirely. Through it all, the human delegation remained silent, studying the data with growing understanding. What the galaxy saw as an unstoppable force of nature, they were beginning to see as a problem that required a different kind of solution. As the session moved toward its inevitable conclusion of managed retreat and desperate evacuation protocols, Admiral Kim Jamin made a decision that would change everything. The universe was about to learn what happened when an unstoppable force met human stubbornness. The stage was set for something the galaxy had never witnessed before. The emergency session had dragged on for nearly 8 hours when Admiral Kim Jamin finally stood up from his chair. The simple action seemed to echo through the massive chamber, and one by one, the arguing delegates fell silent. All 47 species represented in the Galactic Council turned to look at the small human delegation in the back corner. Jamin walked slowly toward the center speaking platform, his footsteps the only sound in the vast crystalline hall. Captain Lee Sora and Dr. Park Min-ho remained seated, but their eyes followed their commander with expressions of quiet determination. "Honored delegates of the Galactic Council," Jamin began, his voice carrying clearly through the chambers. "Translation systems. Humanity requests permission to address this crisis with an alternative proposal." High Arbiter Velkos leaned forward, all 4 of his ancient eyes focusing on the human admiral. "Admiral Kim, while we respect your species' recent membership in this council, the situation we face requires solutions from our most experienced military minds." A ripple of polite but dismissive murmurs passed through the assembly. The Quellian representative's translator produced soft melodic tones that roughly meant well-intentioned but naive. The massive Arcturnian commander shifted in his specially reinforced seat, causing the metal to groan under his weight. "With deep respect," rumbled Commander Thaxwell, "humanity has been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. Your species has never faced extinction-level warfare. The Devourers have consumed civilizations that ruled the galaxy when your world was still covered in ice." Jamin nodded calmly. "That's exactly why we might succeed where you have failed." The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Several delegates activated their translation devices again, certain they had misheard the human statement. Dr. Yoon Ha-jin of the Ethereal Collective floated closer to the speaking platform, her translucent form pulsing with curiosity and concern. "Admiral Kim, perhaps you do not fully understand the scope of this threat. The Devourer forces possess adaptive technology that learns from each engagement. They have weapons that can crack the crust of worlds, and shields that absorb the power of entire stars." "We understand perfectly," Captain Lee Sora said, as she joined Jamin on the platform. "You've been fighting them like a conventional enemy. Humans don't do conventional." She activated a small holographic projector that displayed Earth's current industrial capacity. The numbers made several delegates check their translation systems again. In the 3 weeks since the emergency had been declared, humanity had somehow converted their entire solar system into what could only be described as a weapons factory. "This cannot be accurate," protested the Vorthan military attach. "These production figures suggest your species has militarized every inhabited body in your home system." Dr. Park Min-ho stepped forward with additional displays that made the assembled aliens lean back in their seats. Asteroid mining platforms converted to kinetic weapon manufacturing, lunar colonies producing antimatter containment systems. Gas giant harvesting operations expanded by 400% to fuel our new ship designs. The hologram shifted to show that horrified the watching delegates. Human starship designs that seemed to prioritize raw destructive power over crew survival. Weapon systems that required manual operation by crews, with life expectancies measured in minutes. Battle tactics that assumed 80% casualty rates as acceptable losses. Admiral Zektar, of the Combined Defense Force, stood up so quickly that his chair toppled backward. These are not military strategies. This is organized suicide on an industrial scale. No, Jamin replied quietly. This is war. The distinction seemed lost on most of the delegates, but a few of the older species began to understand. The Thoraxians, who had fought extinction wars in their distant past, exchanged meaningful glances. The battle-scarred Vorthians studied the human projections, with growing recognition of something they had forgotten. Your species is volunteering for extinction, whispered the Quellian representative, her ethereal voice barely audible through the translator. These tactics will result in the complete destruction of human civilization. Captain Lee Sora smiled, grimly. Only if we lose. If we win, we save the galaxy. If we lose, we make sure there's nothing left for the devourers to consume. The final part of the human presentation showed contingency plans that made even the most hardened military commanders in the chamber recoil in horror. Doomsday protocols that would sterilize entire star systems rather than let them fall to the enemy. Scorched earth tactics applied on a galactic scale. You're not just proposing to fight the devourers, High Arbiter, Velkos said slowly. You're proposing to become something equally terrifying. Jamin met the ancient being's four-eyed gaze without flinching. The universe needs monsters to fight monsters. Humanity is willing to become what the galaxy needs us to be. The chamber fell into absolute silence. For the first time in 50,000 years, someone had proposed not just surviving the Devourer threat, but actually defeating it. The cost would be everything humanity had built among the stars, and possibly their soul as a species. But it was the only plan that offered victory. Instead of mere survival, the vote was closer than anyone expected. 3 weeks after the Galactic Council vote, Admiral Cho Sung-woo stood on the command bridge of the battleship Indomitable, watching through reinforced viewports as humanity transformed the Sol system into something the galaxy had never seen. Before, what had once been a peaceful collection of planets and mining operations now resembled a massive weapons factory stretching from Mercury to the outer asteroid belt. Status report, Commander Sung-woo said to the woman beside him. Commander. Bae Youngji consulted her tactical display. Numbers streaming across the screen faster than most alien species could process. All asteroid mining platforms have been converted to weapons manufacturing. Luna Base is now producing 2,000 kinetic penetrator rounds per hour. The Jupiter fuel harvesting operation is running at 300% normal capacity. Through the view, Sung-woo could see the impossible scale of human industrial mobilization, where other galactic species built elegant starships designed to last for centuries. Humans were mass-producing vessels that looked more like flying weapons than spacecraft. Boxy, angular ships with no concern for aesthetics or crew comfort. Built for one purpose, maximum destruction in minimum time. Major Han Dong-soo approached with a tablet full of volunteer statistics that would have horrified the Galactic Council delegates. Sir, we have received 800,000 applications for the ramming cores. Engineering estimates we can accommodate 40,000 volunteers for the first wave. The ramming cores. Sung-woo still felt a chill when he thought about it. Volunteer crews, who would pilot ships loaded with antimatter directly into devourer vessels at near light speed. Other species called it madness. Humans had filled the volunteer slots within 6 hours of posting the recruitment notice. What about The boarding divisions, Sung-woo asked. Over 2 million applications for 50,000 positions, Dong-soo replied. Most applicants have no military training. They just want to fight. Dr. Kim Soo-jin joined the group, carrying classified research that represented humanity's darkest innovations. As Earth's lead weapons researcher, she had spent the past 3 weeks developing technologies that made even hardened military veterans uncomfortable. The Viral Warfare Division has completed their machine intelligence corruption protocols, she reported. Early tests show a 73% success rate in causing critical system failures in captured Devourer technology. The Psychological Operations Team has finished their fear frequency transmissions, designed to disrupt their communication networks. Soo-jin paused, glancing around to make sure no alien observers were present. And Admiral, the Doomsday Contingency is ready for implementation. The Doomsday Contingency. If humanity could not stop the Devourers, they would ensure that nothing remained in human space for the machines to consume. Entire star systems would be sterilized using weaponized stellar engineering. It was extinction-level thoroughness applied to warfare. Through the communications array, reports flooded in from across human space. Earth's orbital shipyards were working around the clock, their automated systems building vessels at a rate that defied galactic engineering standards. The lunar colonies had been converted into ammunition factories. Mars had become a training ground for the most extreme combat scenarios imaginable. Incoming transmission from Centauri Station, announced Communications Officer Lee Jun-ho. The holographic display activated, showing Captain Park Ji-hoon, commanding the fortress installation that guarded humanity's furthest colony. Admiral, all defensive preparations are complete. We have 50,000 volunteers, ready to implement Protocol Omega. If the outer perimeter fails, Protocol Omega meant turning the entire Centauri system into a massive trap. If human forces could not hold the line, they would detonate the system's star and take as many Devourer ships with them as possible. It was the kind of tactical thinking that terrified humanity's galactic allies almost as much as their enemies. What's the status on our alien observers? Sung-woo asked. Commander Bay checked her security reports. The Quellian delegation requested immediate evacuation after witnessing our weapon testing. The Vorthan military attach called our tactics an affront to civilized warfare. Only the Thraxian observers remain, and they seem ... impressed. The Thraxians understood. They were one of the few species that remembered what extinction warfare actually looked like. They recognized that humanity was not just preparing to fight the Devourers, but preparing to become something equally ruthless and unstoppable. Dr. Soo-jin activated another display, showing the most disturbing aspect of human preparation, the psychological profiles of their volunteers. Admiral, our recruitment centers are reporting something unusual. The volunteers are not driven by duty or patriotism. They are excited about this war. It was true. Across human space, millions of people were volunteering for missions with survival rates near zero, and they were doing it with enthusiasm that worried even their own commanders. Humans had discovered something about themselves in preparing for this conflict. They were very good at becoming monsters when the situation required it. How long until the first Devourer scouts reach our outer sensors? Sung-woo asked. 72 hours, sir, replied his tactical officer. Sung-woo nodded and turned back to the viewport. In 3 days, the galaxy would discover whether humanity's transformation into a war machine had created something capable of stopping an unstoppable force, or whether they had simply produced a different kind of nightmare. Either way, the universe would never be the same. The first Devourer scout ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Centauri system, expecting to find another easy harvest. Instead, they encountered something that had not existed in their 50,000 years of galactic conquest. Prey that had become predators. Captain Shin Taeho gripped the command chair of his ship. The Retribution, as it accelerated toward the massive Devourer heavy cruiser at 30% light speed. Around him, His crew of 200 volunteers worked at their stations with calm efficiency. They had known since launch that this was a one-way mission. "All hands, this is your captain," Tejo announced over the ship's communication system. "In 60 seconds, we will impact the enemy vessel. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve with each of you." The Retribution was not really a ship anymore. Human engineers had stripped out everything except engines, navigation, and a fusion reactor, converted into the largest bomb ever built by their species. The entire vessel was now a relativistic missile with a human crew guiding it to its target. Through the viewports, Tejo could see the Devourer ship growing larger. Its hull was covered in adaptive armor that had absorbed the energy weapons of a dozen galactic civilizations without taking damage. But the machines had never faced an enemy willing to turn their own ships into weapons. "Impact in 10 seconds, reported his navigation officer, her voice steady despite their approaching death. "Target locked and confirmed." The collision lit up the Centauri system like a new star being born. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battle zone, Colonel Park Ji-hoon led the 5th Marine Boarding Division through the twisted metal corridors of a partially disabled Devourer vessel. His Marines moved in small groups, each soldier carrying enough explosives to destroy a city block. "Remember the mission parameters," Ji-hoon broadcast over their communication network. "We are not trying to survive this engagement. We are trying to ensure the enemy does not survive it either." Half his Marines carried traditional weapons. The other half carried only bombs and suicide triggers. It was a tactic that would have horrified the civilized species of the Galactic Council, but it was proving devastatingly effective against an enemy that had adapted to conventional warfare. The Devourer machines had programmed responses to boarding actions based on 50,000 years of experience. They expected enemies who would try to capture strategic positions, disable key systems, and then withdraw. They were not prepared for boarding parties whose primary objective was mutual destruction. "Contact front," shouted Sergeant Kim Min as a group of Devourer repair drones rounded a corner. Instead of taking cover and returning fire, he charged directly at them while activating his explosive vest. The hallway filled with fire and twisted metal. In the system's outer asteroid belt, Admiral Jang Mi-kyung coordinated the most brutal space battle in galactic history from the bridge of her flagship. Her tactical displays showed hundreds of engagements across the entire system, each one a small victory purchased with human lives. "Status report on the ramming attacks," she ordered. 73 successful impacts on Devourer capital ships, replied her tactical officer. Estimated crew losses, 12,000 volunteers. Enemy vessel destruction rate, 91% of targeted ships. The numbers told a story that would have broken the heart of any civilized military commander. Humans were trading their lives at rates that other species would consider genocide, but they were winning. "What about the orbital defense platforms?" Mi-kyung asked. "Ceres Station reports successful detonation. They took out an entire Devourer squadron before their reactor overloaded. Vesta Station is preparing for final protocol. They have 3,000 volunteers ready to implement manual detonation if they're automated. Systems fail." The orbital platforms were another example of human tactical thinking that terrified their allies. Each station was built around a massive bomb that could be triggered if the position was about to fall. The crews manning these stations were volunteers who knew they were signing their own death warrants. Communication Officer Park Soo-men looked up from her console with an expression of disbelief. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender signals from 3 Devourer vessels." The bridge fell silent in 50,000 years of recorded history. The Devourers had never retreated from a battle, much less offered surrender. "How do we respond to a machine intelligence trying to surrender?" asked the tactical officer. Mi-kyung thought for a moment, then made a decision that would define humanity's reputation for the rest of galactic history. "Signal all vessels. No prisoners. No surrender. No quarter given or expected. It was the kind of order that would have resulted in war crimes tribunals under normal galactic law. But this was not normal warfare. This was extinctional level combat. And humans had decided that anything less than total victory meant total defeat, as the battle raged across the Centauri system. Observers from the Galactic Council watched in fascinated horror from their safe positions in the Outer Rim territories. They were witnessing something unprecedented, a species that had become so ruthless in defense of their civilization that they were arguably more dangerous than the threat they were fighting. The Devourers had adapted to fight every form of organized military resistance the galaxy could produce. But they had never encountered an enemy that measured victory, not in territory gained or casualties avoided, but in the complete destruction of everyone involved in the fight. For the first time in millennia, the machines were learning what fear felt like. 6 months after the Battle of Centauri, Admiral Kim Jamin stood before the Galactic Council once more. The man who had first proposed humanity's impossible war against the Devourers looked nothing like the confident officer who had addressed the assembly half a year earlier. His left arm was gone, lost when his flagship's command bridge took a direct hit from a Devourer plasma cannon. Burn scars covered the visible parts of his face and hands. His uniform bore the patches and insignia of battles that had claimed billions of human lives. The great chamber of the Galactic Council was quieter now. Many of the species that had argued so loudly during the first emergency session now sat in respectful silence, unsure how to process what humanity had accomplished and what they had become in the process. Honored delegates, Jamin began, his voice carrying the weight of impossible decisions and unimaginable losses. I am here to report that the Devourer fleet has withdrawn beyond the galactic rim. Our deep space monitoring stations confirm they are retreating to dark space for the first time in recorded history. A murmur of amazement passed through the assembly. High Arbiter, Velkos leaned forward, all 4 of his ancient eyes focused intently on the scarred human admiral. Admiral Kim, please provide the Council with details of this unprecedented victory. Captain Lee Sora, now wearing the insignia of an admiral and walking with a cybernetic leg that replaced the limbs she had lost in the siege of Mars colony, stepped forward to assist with the briefing. The Devourer fleet lost approximately 40% of their total forces before initiating their withdrawal. Based on our analysis of their behavioral patterns, they will not attempt another galactic harvest within the current cosmic cycle. The numbers behind humanity's victory told a story that made even hardened military veterans shift uncomfortably in their seats. 63% of the human space fleet had been destroyed. 12 entire colonies had been sacrificed as strategic diversions, their populations volunteering to fight hopeless battles that bought time for the main offensive. 4 billion humans had died in 6 months of the most brutal warfare the galaxy had ever witnessed. Dr. Park Minho, his once scholarly appearance now marked by the same scars and cybernetic replacements as his colleagues, activated holographic displays showing the aftermath of humanity's Pyrrhic victory. The Sol system has been completely militarized. Earth's population has been reduced by 30%. Our industrial capacity will require decades to recover. The social and psychological effects on our species are still being evaluated. Commander Faxwell of the Thraxian hegemony, one of the few species that had supported humanity's war effort, spoke first. Admiral Kim, your species achieved what we believed impossible. The Devourers had not been defeated in 50 millennia. How did you succeed, where civilizations with far greater technology failed? Jamin was quiet for a long moment before answering. We succeeded because we were willing to become something that terrified us more than the enemy did. We discovered that humans are very good at becoming monsters when the alternative is extinction. The blunt honesty of his statement created an uncomfortable silence in the chamber. The Quellian representative, her ethereal form pulsing with nervous energy, finally voiced what many delegates were thinking. Admiral, While we are grateful for your species' sacrifice, many of our worlds now question whether we have simply traded one existential threat for another. The question hung in the air like a physical presence. During the war, humanity had demonstrated tactical ruthlessness that made their galactic allies almost as afraid of them as they had been of the Devourers. Human military doctrine had evolved beyond conventional warfare into something that resembled organized extinction events. Admiral Lee Sora stepped forward, her expression grim but understanding. We've asked ourselves the same question every day since the fighting ended. Humanity learned things about ourselves during this war that we can never forget. We became capable of things that should be impossible for any civilized species. She activated another display, showing the psychological evaluations of surviving human military personnel. The data revealed transformation that went beyond simple combat trauma. Humans had adapted to extinctional-level warfare in ways that fundamentally changed their relationship with violence and death. Our war veterans returned to civilian life carrying knowledge of tactics that other species would classify as war crimes. Sora continued. Our children grow up hearing stories of victories achieved through mutual destruction. Our industrial capacity is permanently configured for the rapid production of weapons that should not exist. Jamin nodded slowly, meeting the gaze of each delegate in turn. The galaxy is safer now because the Devourers fear returning here. But that safety comes from the fact that they encountered something worse than they were. Whether that makes us heroes or monsters is a question we cannot answer ourselves. High Arbiter, Velkos spoke carefully, choosing his words with the wisdom of centuries. Admiral Kim, humanity has saved galactic civilization. But you have also demonstrated that salvation sometimes requires becoming the very thing we fear most. The truth was simple and terrifying. Humanity had won their war against extinction by embracing extinction as a weapon. They had saved the galaxy by becoming willing to destroy it rather than let it fall to the enemy. The universe was safer now, but the species that had made it safe could never return to what they had been before. As the session concluded, 47 galactic civilizations grappled with their new reality. They owed their continued existence to a species that had proven they were the most dangerous thing in known space. The price of victory was everything humanity had been, traded for everything the galaxy needed them to become.